The mid and late 2010s was a dark time for Call of Duty. The golden era of CoD had waxed old and players were left with forgettable titles, poorly scripted villains, and an endless plethora of predatory monetization schemes.
I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3 years ago.
The environment in video gaming in general didn't have a whole lot to offer, leaving players like myself in a desolate and uninteresting space. A space where developers' only concern was focusing on how to monetize their next brand idea. And when it came to CoD, there didn't seem to be much on the horizon either. Apparently, dog skins and crappy fish AI was all that CoD creators had to offer the gaming community. What I did there? See that? Because crappy fish, because crappy's a fish. No? No. Okay. Alright, well, get back to the video. And you can only hype those up so much, but dang, they sure tried. It had seemed that we were just going to have to accept that the good old days of CoD were behind us. It appeared that old CoD had just lost the glimmer. Fuck. Magic.
So, this is it then, is it? After all we've been through?
This is low-key sad. No cap.
That is until
we push hard enough and the light breaks through the cloud.
and Activision finally comes out with a half-decent game. Holy crap. Modern Warfare 2019. The best-selling Call of Duty in all of CoD history. But, was it really the best? Or was it just decent? Or were we just used to the crap that we'd gotten for the last 5 years and now this one was awesome? And did it really save the franchise? Today we're going to examine this highly popular game and go through exactly how this installment of the series reinvigorated the CoD community, brought the franchise back to the high throne of video game relevancy once had. So, let's jump back into slide cancels, old school trash talk, and raging over the lack of anti-cheat and find out exactly why Modern Warfare 2019 saved Call of Duty. In late 2019, the popularity of Modern Warfare was undeniable. I began seeing a flood of YouTube videos inundating my notification feeds. Friends from high school were posting memes about it on Facebook. Heck, I couldn't even go to church without one of my buddies telling me about how much he was enjoying CoD now. Excuse me, sir, do you have a moment to speak about our Lord and Savior, Captain Price? Could it be? Could this be the same hype we felt with Modern Warfare 2 way back in 2009? Was this the proverbial midnight release with hundreds of people lined out the doors of every GameStop in the county that we pretty much hadn't seen in a decade? There was only one way to find out, and that was putting my $60 on the line, wading through the massive 150, 160 gig download, and giving CoD another chance.
Shrek! Oh, come on, donkey. Look at him in his wee little boots.
But before we jump into this main review, I do want to remind you that I've got this awesome playlist of retro reviews where we do go back to the golden eras of CoD and we look at Modern Warfare 2, we look at Black Ops 2, and even some of the nostalgic eras of Battlefield as well. I guarantee you're going to love those. It's going to give you a really nice hit of nostalgia. So, like that kind of content, please like and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, leave a comment below letting me know so I can personally thank you for supporting your favorite all-American freedom-loving gamer. But for now, back to the video. First of all, the tone of this game brought us right back to the good old days. No wall-running super soldiers, no exosuits or jetpacks, no stupid lobbies watching people open dozens upon dozens upon dozens of battle packs with just pistol grips in them. This one had a lot more realism. It had more grit. And it took the time to relay that to the player as well. They were bringing back the OGs, our heroes from the early 2010s, the real badasses of video game history. And to our surprise, they actually didn't butcher it, with re-releases and reboots of today offering little more than the opportunity for companies to abuse old titles by checking off their diversity boxes and wokeness scorecards. Yes, that is actually a thing. If you'd like to see it, we'll leave a link down below. There's so many ways that Infinity Ward could have screwed this up, but they didn't. Price actually come off as a believable badass. The characters weren't cheesy, infallible superheroes. And the storytelling wasn't abused with over-the-top action, just for the sake of over-the-top action. It ebbed and it flowed and made for a pretty decent experience. Except for Spec Ops, of course, but there's so little content there and it's just so crappy, and Infinity Ward just... they glossed over so much of that it's not even worth mentioning in this review. And I just want to say, Modern Warfare, Infinity Ward, you guys take a big L for what should have been an entire third of the game. But moving on. For the first time in years, I was actually excited to play a new game. And it was the attention to detail that laid the foundation for something we just weren't used to. A game that actually didn't suck.
And they said over and over again, we are expected to go into imperfect situations and operate perfectly. And that is the burden that we carry. And that's the one thing that we would like the world to know.
This idea was presented by the military advisors for the game, former Navy SEAL operators Mitch Hall and Steve Sanders. If we play through the entire game, it's very obvious that this theme permeates every crevice of the single-player campaign experience.
For us, the challenge was, if we want this game to be authentic and realistic and not a kind of a cliched Hollywood depiction of war, then we've got to ask them, what are some themes that are universal to your experience that you feel that we could do justice to in our game?
Modern Warfare brought realism and grit back to the franchise in a profound way that showcased the blurred lines and the gray areas experienced by combat operators executing their duties abroad. I think Price said it best.
We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission.
And it kind of got me thinking about how many behind-the-scenes adrenaline-pumping acts of heroism occur every single year that keeps us cozy in our homes, enjoying family and friends, and of course, Call of Duty. From the developer standpoint, a painstaking obsession with detail was adhered to throughout the entire production. Developers stayed in constant contact with their Navy SEAL advisors, with the SEALs even taking some of the creators who had never shot a gun before to a day at the range to let them really feel the recoil, to experience what it was like to shoot a gun, and to better understand how a firearm operates. This comes across very obvious that they actually had some kind of idea about what they were doing during the making of this game. This, coupled with the immaculate graphics thanks to a process called photogeometry, sold the player on an immersive experience. Much akin to the golden era of CoD, there wasn't many places that Infinity Ward wasn't willing to go. I mean, dang, in the first 30 minutes of the game, you end up throwing some poor sap off the top floor landing to keep his suicide vest from completely annihilating every person in the vicinity. It presents real-world catastrophes, plops them down in the lap of the player, and says, deal with it. From fathers being executed right in front of their children, to kids actually taking a bullet from terrorists, it all showcases the real-life evil that our fellow man has the capability of. Of course, there are certain bounds that you just don't cross, and Animals is one. Oh my god, they did not. And early on, Gaz complains about wanting to take the gloves off, and sets what I believe is the whole narrative for this campaign.
They sent us in half-assed, so everyone can just keep pretending we're not at war.
Yeah, like the fucking century, that is.
Why have we got our hands tied? Let's just take the bloody gloves off and fight. Sir.
Come on.
We don't stand a chance in hell with these rules of engagement, Captain. They can tell us where, they can tell us when. Don't tell us how.
Gaz blames his own nation's laws, rules of engagement, and diplomacy for the deaths of so many innocents, and red tape being in the way of what really needs to be done, which quite often and most often is the case. This game actually has that conversation, and it shows the real bloody side of doing what has to be done in the moment versus adhering to a strict set of rules and conduct. Now, don't get me wrong, there's reasons for rules of engagement and diplomacy, but we can't pretend like those pillars haven't also gotten soldiers killed on the battlefield, while politicians who have never even come close to seeing frontline combat just squabble over issues at home. There's a balance, and this game actually had the balls to have that conversation. That's what I like.
With women and children.
They were leveraged.
They were
When
hostages.
you take the gloves off, you get blood on your hands, Kyle. That's how it works.
Where do we draw the line, sir?
You draw the line wherever you need it, Sergeant. End of the day, someone has to make the enemy scared of the dark. We get dirty, and the world stays clean. That's the mission. Now, if you're having second thoughts, then I can do this on my own.
No, sir. No second thoughts.
Good. Now let's get out of here before he kills Barkov.
And while we see a lot of progress in the storyline when the gloves do come off, we also see what has to be done to make that happen, when normally we just have to sit at home and read news headlines of what's transpired. While much like Gaz, wanting to take the gloves off but never really fully understanding what has to be done when that happens, I found myself kind of identifying with Gaz and also identifying with Price at the same time when, you know, you're hearing them go back and forth over what lengths they're willing to go through. I think this is an incredible character arc for both of them, and it really sold me on the experience. Because, you know, we don't take in the reality of what lengths brave men have to go to be willing to do, to be the reapers in the night of those who propagate cruelty and malice in the world. Those villains, they don't understand laws. They pay no heed to diplomacy, and they're even willing to twist that structure of government to meet their own agenda. Modern Warfare puts us behind the scenes and shows the brutality of what has to be done to rid the world of evil, and in most cases, diplomacy and law only serve as deterrents for what needs to be done, both concerning the rules of engagement abroad and the control of the populace here at home. Because when it comes down to it, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and the massive balls to do what has to be done for the good of others. And while Infinity Ward did a good job of having that conversation, it wouldn't amount to anything without at least a decent campaign. Fortunately, the devs produced a game that was well paced. Instead of absolute cinematic chaos at every single turn, the story would ebb and flow to make the slow times more tense and the time for action have more weight and context to it. This design would sidestep the mistakes often made in sequels that are, you know, really focusing on trying to one-up their predecessors, much like those of Modern Warfare 3.
Perfection.
While blowing up stuff and shooting your way through scores of enemies really is fun, sometimes it's cool just to sit back and operate a remote control plane laden with explosives. The mission where we play as Farah alongside her brother offered a unique challenge that forced us into a disadvantage of playing a 5-year-old girl, and that made us feel a lot more vulnerable, a lot less capable than the character we were just playing minutes ago. Likewise, guiding Stacy through the embassy evading terrorists was an interesting break from the point-and-shoot action. It really did have a multifaceted allure for a variety of gameplay, keep things fresh, and hold your attention. Additionally, every single hero character in this campaign was well thought out and had a developed storyline. And this is something I didn't even realize until afterwards, but listen, Infinity Ward actually did diversity the right way, unlike some more recent games.
The Negro give orders in English too.
Why? Because I am a woman.
Bet you ain't never met a Negro before, neither. We ain't exactly in the credit-getting business.
I would not take orders from a Negro either.
How are we going to get rid of racism?
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man.
The problem with most reboots, sequels, and remakes, especially in 2022, is the extreme focus on placing minority characters into a story with nothing more than race or gender in mind, and subsequently having to handle those said characters with kid gloves because we can't even show a minority even attempting to make a struggle. That would be racist. We can't have them come up against challenges. We can't have them fail. God forbid we don't level the playing field by ramming in a scene of a 90-pound butch-cutted lesbian taking down a 230-pound Spetsnaz operator. That's realism, right? And all this forced diversity does is just make for boring characters that no one can relate to, and ends up doing a disservice to minority players who actually want someone to identify with. But the fact that I didn't notice Modern Warfare's success in this until afterwards is proof that they did it right. Instead of the cringy storytelling of Vanguard and many other similar titles, each minority character strength wasn't derivative of which race or gender they were, but instead they were just strong and well-written characters. Kyle Garrick, or Gaz, was a perfect example of a decent character that happened to be black, and not some bullet point that Activision could check off on their diversity scorecard. Yeah, sure, the original from back in the day was white, but But I mean, who really cares? It doesn't take away from the story. It doesn't change any lore. So we don't care what race or gender he is. His character was the perfect springboard for the entire message of this campaign of taking the gloves off. Farah, for instance, was a strong and knowledgeable woman whose strength didn't lie in masculine traits like sheer force, but instead a tenacity to do right by her people and a deep understanding of the world around her. That is diversity done right. But in the case of Modern Warfare, we have that strong, relatable characters that bolster the story. It doesn't take away from it. So I gotta say, bravo, Infinity Ward, you actually didn't screw the pooch on this one.
Mission accomplished. Good work.
Now, I do want to note that I think the story's villains could have had a lot more depth, could have had proper motivations to bring them more to life. It did seem that Barkov was a shallow character with most of the attention going towards the development of our story's heroes, and it was kind of disappointing to see that the campaign's main villain was just a dictator with no other motivations other than to rid his country of insurgents through mass genocide. Yes, that's awful, but a little more backstory would have been nice. Plus, spreading the story thin over 2 or 3 big bads made it less satisfying to finally finish the game. There wasn't as much reason to put down the bad guy or maybe even understand them. In contrast, a deep backstory is what made Raul Menendez such a memorable character from Black Ops 2. He had motivation. He had real seething pain that he wielded as a powerful weapon against his adversary. However, the sheer variety of gameplay in this campaign did a decent job to make up for the lack of the villain's character progression on the back end. We see quite a lot of character development for Farah. The missions we play as her offer a fantastic narrative where we're no longer badass operators with nods and all the firepower in the world. We get to experience at least some kind of struggle playing Farah in her youth. And let me tell you guys, nothing was more aggravating in this game than trying to get this 5-year-old to be able to hold, let alone competently operate a .44 Magnum. I mean, why couldn't she be like this kid? But dang, it did make you feel much more helpless to the situation around you for sure. So, a good level all in all. Now, except for that one particular mission, the gunplay here was just, wow, it was awesome. Perfection in this title. Each game had a unique feel, and the sheer attention to detail that went into every single firearm was enough to keep any red-blooded, freedom-loving, gun-toting American like myself occupied for hours. And the throwback to a grittier atmosphere that did away with the vibrant, happy-go-lucky colors brought the game back to a more adult feeling, mature, and serious nature. Well, you know, at least for maybe 3 or 4 months anyways. For instance, Clean House probably stands as one of the most iconic Call of Duty missions in the franchise. Instead of crossing open fields in an epic hail of gunfire, we were closely confined in tight spaces, having to make ultra-precise shots. Right up there along with No Russian and All Gillied Up, this particular mission did an even better job at immersing us in a real-life situation where split-second decisions showcase just a glimmer of the stress that real operators have to take in missions like this. Not everything is black and white, not every bad guy is obviously wearing a black hat, and we get a glimpse of life into the everyday Middle Eastern towns infected with Islamic extremists, and what it's like when the good guys come to clean house. And it's not pretty, but it has to be done. The gritty nature of this mission permeates the campaign with real-life scenarios, with real locations, or at least similar locations and circumstances. And in fact, a week before release, Navy SEAL operators Mitch Hall and Steve Sanders called the crew they had been working with for 3 years before, telling them that they hit the nail on the head and that a house clearing mission often ran the exact same way depicted in Clean House. Usually they're getting calls that are saying quite the opposite. Another example, if you've ever watched 13 Hours, the real life story of the soldiers of Benghazi, the mission, the embassy in the game, probably had your hair standing on end. I know it did for me. The real panic and urgency to protect the innocent and survive was palpable. And that's what made this game work. You cannot separate the game mechanics from the story. Both have to be running strong to truly knock it out of the park, and Infinity Ward did just that. In a general overview, Modern Warfare is what brought many back to the CoD franchise, as well as a multitude of new players, paving the way for a new generation for the Call of Duty community. Let's not kid ourselves though. it was obvious that the golden era of COD had ended years ago with the OG Modern Warfare and the Black Ops series, yeah, that's it. I personally remember trying one more time in 2014 just to see what Activision had conjured up, so I went to a local GameStop and optimistically bought a copy of Ghost, hoping the game would surprise me and hopefully bring me back to the good old days of noob tubes, 360 no-scopes, and hours on end of entertainment and fun. So after hours of gameplay, attempting to find a redeeming quality to the game, I eventually gave up. Realistic dog skins and fish mechanics just would not hold my attention, so I just kind of shrugged and thought, well, I mean, I guess that's what gaming has to offer today, and I set it back on the shelf. Years of wall-running super soldiers with jetpacks had really turned me off the franchise in general, and with the meager attempt to return to quote-unquote boots-on-the-ground gameplay with Ghost, I found myself pressing F to pay respects, turning away from the games that I cherished in my younger years. Until October 2019. So, let's talk about the impeccable timing of this game's release, and to be honest, if you're like me, you ignored this game for some time before finally relenting and giving it a try. I mean, you saw the disasters of the past, and you really wanted to see if this was something you wanted to spend money on. And let's be for real, remakes just suck. And at the time, not much was truly worth immersing yourself in. Even the idiot developers at Genderfield 5 had recently attacked their own player base with accusations of sexism and misogyny, telling players to simply not buy the game if they didn't like it, which left many Battlefield fans with no place to spend their time or their money. Activision smelled blood in the water, and for good reason, with not only the renewing of the good old days of COD, but Activision also went out on a limb to serve those Battlefield players whose developers had abandoned them, offering up a kind of similar experience with the Ground War game mode. In COD terms, the maps were absolutely massive and offered a hybrid experience of Battlefield and COD gameplay. Although the game mode was nowhere near as nuanced as Battlefield, especially when it came to vehicles, it was an olive branch to those on the other side. Wow, EA told me not to buy their game based on political correctness, but this other franchise is actively making strides to catch my attention and go out of their norm to accommodate my interests, and this is probably worth checking out. And so, I did. While Battlefield 5 halted updates to their so-called World War II game, COD developers had found a footing in the gaping hole that EA had left with their failures. For the next year and the introduction of Warzone, it seemed that Activision had captured lightning in a bottle, capitalizing on the failure of their competition and timing their success perfectly in a time where people were stuck at home in front of their computer screen. Modern Warfare was setting records, kicking ass, taking name. With the advanced movement, the best gunplay in the series by far, and the doing away with the cringy mess of loot boxes, it seemed that Activision was actually actively listening to the player base, at least for now anyways. And of course, my experience wasn't love at first sight, mind-melting, holy crap, happy days are here again. I took my time wading into the waters and varying my gameplay between Battlefield 1, 4, and Modern Warfare. I slowly began to see that the attention to detail, the time that was taken on this game that lacked in others, the gunplay, the diverse and well-designed maps were all a throwback to the golden era. The 4 years of COD that I enjoyed so much. Slowly but surely, I found that it was fun to unlock new weapons, new camos, new attachments, to show off game tags and emblems to unlock certain achievements. This was actually fun. And with the updated movement mechanics, it offered a whole new skill ceiling to get good and find new ways to wreck my opponents. So, there's no doubt that this game has its flaws, especially at launch. I'm going to stop talking about all the positive things about it, because there are negative aspects. And regardless of me ordering my brand new iBuyPower PC loaded to the brim with the latest in graphic rendering tech, sadly no amount of PC power was going to overcome the game's wonky connection issues and seemingly routine crashes. Along with a never-ending stream of cheaters and hackers, especially in Warzone, it was pretty rough. There were some technical aspects that the devs seriously dropped the ball on. In most cases, the opening menu of the game didn't even want to load in properly, and then having to have your friends wait in the lobby while your dang shaders loaded was a real bummer. And probably the one thing that Infinity Ward just shat the bed on when it came to this game was the damn skill-based matchmaking. For real, me and my buddies had gotten tired of being railed in Warzone after a while. And this was after we finally learned that our efforts were in vain, to get better, we found it harder to stay engaged, and we would go play Battlefield for a while, where we had a server browser where we could really test our mettle against the guys playing. But in Call of Duty, the more we succeeded, the more we got punished for doing so. And those who sucked got rewarded. Who came up with this idea? Brandon? We would actually not play and wait for a big update as we noticed that this would reset the skill-based matchmaking, at least for a few rounds. We ended up winning a game or two and, just totally railing everybody in a lobby before skill-based matchmaking kicked in again and we got thrown in lobbies with Exact and Joe Woe. Yeah, I'm just kidding. We were never that. But shit got hard. But unfortunately, among all the praise that I can heap on to Modern Warfare 2019, this one aspect just sucks. And not because this bad idea is affecting just this game. Oh no, it's affecting the entire Call of Duty series. I'm hoping and praying it's somehow done away with, or at least tweaked. I don't even like it being tweaked. I just want it gone. There was even speculation and research done to suggest that it wasn't skill-based matchmaking, but retention-based matchmaking to manipulate you into staying on the game longer. It was supposed that the game would gauge how long you were willing to get railed and then throw you a bot lobby to make you feel good and keep playing. I don't want that. I don't want to be manipulated. I want to be rewarded for getting better, but Activision's never-ending greed to protect noobs and have them stay on longer just to buy more anime skins just ruins the entire experience for the core community, and it needs to stop. Aside from this game was pretty good. Not the greatest COD ever, but a real staple in the franchise for sure. The gunsmith was extremely innovative. I took pride in how my weapon setup actually looked, how it operated with the camos, and really, I never even cared about that stuff before. But the camos, the stickers, the blueprints, the charms, the takedowns made every single weapons platform unique and a way to make it yours. Modern Warfare launched with 3 ground war maps, 7 gunfight maps for the ultimate core settling experience, and 10 standard multiplayer maps with 3 night vision versions of those for a total of 23. And let me tell you, loading into that nighttime skirmish and turning on those night vision goggles was just pure satisfaction. Silky smooth. While just 10 regular maps may have been on the slim side of things, there were plenty of different modes to keep you busy until developers ended up more than doubling the map count by Season 6. One aspect that players seem to be split on, I'm not sure why, was the map design. I, for one, loved them. Infinity Ward was branching out and offering more complex maps to play in, aside from the overdone and simplistic 3-lane maps past. It felt much more akin to the rest of the game, more realistic, gritty, but nowhere near enough to being a mill sim as to keep the classic Call of Duty action flowing. But I thought it offered a slightly slower and more thoughtful pace to the gameplay, somewhat leaning towards the pace that many Battlefield games presented, and that's probably why I appreciate it. Score streaks I thought were fun and impactful to the gameplay, but not invincible either. In another instance of customization, you got to pick out an execution should you get the drop on an enemy in-game, and most of the time it was nothing short of satisfying and offered another way for COD players to do what they do best, troll one another. And on top of all that, they throw in Warzone, a place where we would spend countless hours of frustration, happiness, and getting absolutely dumpstered by hackers. Now listen, I know, Hitch, Warzone's a totally different game than Modern Warfare. I'm lumping this in with it because it had all the same engine, the same weapons, the same perks, hell, even the same map aspects from Ground War were used to make Verdansk. As far as I'm concerned, that sounds like the same game to me, and it's a critical part as to why it saved the franchise, so that's why we're talking about it. As it would later be revealed, the developers had no idea that Warzone was going to go gangbusters like it did. It was an overnight phenomenon where COD creators had accidentally stumbled upon success, which seems sometimes that's the only way it's going to happen, and now had to deal with the massive demands of that success. Warzone, in my opinion, was at its strongest in Season 3, maybe 4, and the absolute peak of the fun was the nighttime zombie mode that should have been left in the playlist indefinitely. Although challenging and higher stakes than the regular multiplayer, Warzone was still more forgiving than the other popular battle royales of the time, making it a lot more accessible than those battle royales. In most classics like PUBG, you get in just one fight, lose, and have to go back to an entirely new queuing session all over again. If you are a new player, you might spend just as much time in game as you would in menus and waiting for pre-game lobbies to fill up. But with Warzone, you had a chance or two to make mistakes, and even if you failed, you still got to get into many more gunfights than other titles, allowing you to become more competent, allowing you to get in there and get your hands dirty just a little bit more. In my estimation, this perfect balance, along with allowing customizable loadouts, is what made Warzone so successful. Oh man, to imagine what it could have been if skill-based matchmaking had been dropped and an anti-cheat installed, which was another massive failure on Activision's part and a true conundrum as to why that wasn't dealt with right away, but nothing we can do about it now. The tactical team play I enjoyed with friends was some of the most fun I have ever had in a Call of Duty, where defeat was so bitter, but victory so sweet. And I know we all had our problems with Verdansk, and maybe hindsight is 20/20, or maybe it's just rose-colored glasses, but Verdansk was an enormous map for Call of Duty, and attaining 150 players was something that was just totally unheard of at the time. The sheer fact that the game could run at all was actually pretty impressive if you're thinking about it. The layout of Verdansk was something I found particularly impressive, and made finding all these hidden storylines and Easter eggs in the map extremely satisfying and immersive. I remember looking at Verdansk multiple times, lots of times before we dropped in, thinking, yeah, this is actually a town, like people once lived here. That's the way it felt. It was an immersive experience, and I appreciate the detail that they did spend on Warzone. All in all, I truly believe that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019 is what put the franchise back on the map. Even though Activision has suffered some pretty bad blunders since then, I've got my fingers crossed that maybe, just maybe, Infinity Ward will learn from their success and mistakes and repeat their victory in 2019, bringing an immersive and addictive experience to us again. I do want to remind you that if you like this review, I've got plenty more just like it in my review playlist linked above and in the description below. I'm taking painstaking links to make these videos as quality focused as possible, and if you think they are, please leave a like and sub, and then click on one of those videos to bring back some nostalgia and remember just why we love COD in the first place. God bless, happy gaming, get you good out.